Groundwater Sustainability Agency to order. The first thing we'll do is pledge the flag of our nation. Roll call, please.
Board Member Conley.
Here.
Board Member Smith.
Here.
Board Member Bynum. Board Member Daly. And Board Member Susan Latulip.
Okay, first up is the board will elect a chair and vice chair. I'll entertain a motion.
So I move that we maintain what we currently have. I know
good with it.
you're the chair.
Yeah.
So I don't know
who the vice
who's
chair
the vice chair currently. Do we have one? Bill's the vice chair. Okay. So I move that we.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay, yeah, we keep what we
Okay,
have.
is there any other interest in being the chair or vice chair? All right, then we'll just vote on that. There's no public comment like that Bill Conley's in it. I didn't say it. I almost said it. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody against? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much for your approval. We're now going to consider approval of the December 16th board meetings.
So I move that we approve the December 16th board meeting.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes. Oh, we're moving right along. I just like this. Oh, we're so much better than the other GSAs. We're going to consider approval of the Wyandotte Creek GSA monthly financial status report. Kelly Peterson.
Yes, Chair, all three of these items are on the consent calendar.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem.
All right, I'm sorry. Okay, let's make a motion to approve that, somebody. Your turn.
I make a motion, I don't know how to say.
Just say, I make a motion to approve number 3 and number 4.
I will make a motion to approve number 3 and number 4.
A second?
We're in training now. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Yeah, all of it was on the consent calendar, so.
Well,
yeah.
I got rattled, man. I'm supposed to get $1 million for the Vet Memorial Park, and just before I left my office, it got kind of screwed up, and I'm still rattled. I don't know how. I think it's going to happen, but that's another game, another place. Okay, regular business. The board will receive an update on the Wyandotte Creek Groundwater Sustainability Plan. Kelly Peterson.
Great, thank you, Chair. Conley, Kelly Peterson, Butte County Water and Resource Conservation District. I just want to give you guys a quick update. I know it's been a long time since we've met, but the GSP that you approved and adopted back in December was submitted on time and to DWR. And so that went through a public comment period, which ended on April 23rd. That GSP plan is available on the website, and it's currently now on DWR's desk for review. And at this point, I believe it's they have a maximum of 2 years to go ahead and review and approve that. So I just wanted to give you a quick update and let you know that we did meet that compliance deadline.
That's good. So that's just an update. We don't need to vote on that, all right? Any questions? We'll move on to 6. We'll receive a presentation of the 2021 Water Year Annual Report for Wyandotte Creek Subdivision. You're up again, Kelly.
Great, thank you. We'll just pull up the PowerPoint presentation here. I know it has been a long time since we've met, so I wanted to give you guys a quick overview of the annual report for the Wyandotte Creek GSA and the subbasin. This was actually due as a Sigma compliance regulation on April 1st. And this is the first one that we've worked with, and so in future years we do anticipate bringing more of this information back to you before submittal. But given that we just had a really tight turnaround that's already been submitted this year, it's also available on our website. And at the end of the presentation, we'll kind of go through some more slides on what we anticipate the schedule to look like next year. Your advisory committee did review this presentation and this report as well in March when they met last. And before I start, I just want to give credit where it's due. The major pull of this was done by Christina Buck, who's also with our department, and other supporting staff, as well as our major consultant teams with this, which was David's Engineering and Ludorf and Scalmini. And also, we have other consultants that played into all this, but Geosyntec and GEI are part of that as well, too. So I will just jump in. This is a very wordy slide. I'm not going to go through all of it, but I wanted to give you guys a sense of the requirements for the annual report. Mostly that you've got to include executive summaries and maps. You've got to include your groundwater elevation contour maps for each principal aquifer. And as you recall, Wyandotte Creek has one principal aquifer that we're working with here. The annual report also includes an estimate of groundwater extraction in the subbasin for the preceding water year, which would have been the water year of 2021. And then we also are required to report the actual surface water supplies. So not just how much we're taking out of the ground through pumping, but what surface water supplies are available in the subbasin, and also the total water use. And that's kind of where you get into the water budgeting pieces of that. And so that all kind of boils down to change in groundwater storage. So if you think of it as what we're putting in and what we're taking out and what's left as the balance, that's your real change in storage. It also requires a graph looking at not only the water year type, but the amount of use and the annual change in that storage, which we'll go over today. And then finally, a description of progress towards implementing the plan overall. And so for that change in groundwater storage, we went all the way back to 2000 and kind of looked at a more historical view of that. So just to get us back in the right time of frame here, the water year is based on October 1 of any given year to September 30th of any given year. So we're looking at 2020 of October to September 30th of 2021. We did include the fall measurements, which technically were collected in October of 21. And so it fell out of this particular area, but it does give us a sense of what the conditions were in that time period. And we'll be talking about acre feet today, which is the volume of water that covers 1 acre, 1 foot. So if you can imagine that, it's a football field with about a foot of water on top of it, and that's what a acre foot is. So we'll start by looking at water year conditions. This graph here along the bottom starts on October 1 and goes through September 30th of each year. So that's your water year. The lines here that you see indicate the amount of precipitation that fell through time. So if you're looking at the pink line there, that's the 2021 water year. And you can see that's about 24 inches of water throughout the whole year. The water year started out very dry with a few small storms, but overall a very dry spring. And so when you do have those dry conditions, as far as agriculture is concerned, that impacts it in a way that it causes an extension of the irrigation season, basically. So as you can see, by mid-March, we really received the bulk of the precip that we were going to get throughout the year. It was classified as a critical water year type, and that makes sense. This was the second of the third year of a drought. So currently we're in the third year of drought, and we're looking at what it was in that second year. So statewide conditions, you can see there, 49% precip, very low runoff, and reservoir storage only at about 58%. And the actual runoff itself, too, was severely low at 30 36% of average. So this kind of sets the stage for what we'll be talking about next, is that this really did occur in a very dry year. So when we talk about that, we can look at regional water supplies and how it affected that. Our state water project through the state of California starts here at Lake Oroville. And so we're at the very head of that. State water contractors were reduced to 5% of their water rights, their 5% allocation. So that's really low conditions for surface water. And that in turn puts more demand on groundwater. There were curtailments of local water supplies, and then also a 50% reduction in Feather River diversions. And that's actually a pretty rare occurrence for that to happen. But as a result of that, what happens if you don't get as many surface water supplies in, you have to pump more groundwater. And that's due to cutbacks, but it's also due to the dry conditions, the lack of precipitation. So it just gives you a sense of kind of where we're at. And countywide, we did see 45 reports throughout the county that were made through the DWR's My Dry Well Supply Program. A few of those did occur in Wyandotte Creek. However, it's a voluntary program, so we fully understand that just because there's only 45 there, it's probably likely highly underreported.
You want me to click for you?
Sure. So we can talk about groundwater level conditions now. So in 2021, the levels were similar to conditions that we've seen in previous droughts. And we did see some new lows, but I went through the hydrographs even just this morning to review it, and I believe only one of our RMS wells did hit a new low in fall of 2021. But it's important to note that the spring and fall levels were well above the measurable objective. And the closest one that was even near the measurable objective was about 4 feet higher than that. So that is good news. And again, all of our groundwater levels were within that margin of flexibility. So that's really good to see, especially compared to the fact that we are in those high drought conditions. And the next slide here kind of indicates what that means by margin of flexibility.
Sorry.
It's okay. So you can see there's a green line. So when we say most of the groundwater levels were above that measurable objective, that green line is where we want to be and where we said we want to be. Where we never want to be is down to the minimum threshold, and that's where we've defined that undesirable results will occur. This is just an example. And each one of the wells in our representative monitoring system has its own MO, or measurable objective, and its own MT. So all of the measurements in the previous year were above that green line, which is what we want. So groundwater extraction is part of the annual report, and it's really good to look at basically the volume of water that's pumped out in that given time period. So that's split up into 3 sectors. You can see there's agricultural managed wetlands. That is actually grouped together by both of those, but in future years, managed wetland water is going to be broken out so that we can kind of see that difference. And then there's also groundwater extraction for municipal and industrial uses. As you can see, Cal Water Oroville and Thermolito Water and Sewer District. And then there's also groundwater extracted in the subbasin for domestic uses, and this would be houses that have wells that use it for their residential supply. So as far as groundwater extraction, you can see agricultural managed wetlands make up about 96% of the groundwater that's pulled for use. And overall, though, for total water use, groundwater makes up about 58% of our total water use, but we'll get into that in the next slide. So when we look at the the total groundwater extraction of 333,000 acre feet, it's good to put that in context. So if you were to look back on an average from 2000 to 2018 and say, okay, on average, what have we pulled out? That number is 47, about 47,100. So this year, or I'm sorry, the previous year, we actually took out close to 750 acre feet less than on average. So just to put that in perspective a little bit.
Just a quick question on the
Sure.
rural residential. That's obviously an estimate. Is that, obviously those are permitted wells. So is there an actual number attached to that? How many residential wells based on that estimate?
So yes, the domestic groundwater extraction, that's actually based on Cal Water and the South Feather Water and Power. They put out urban water management plans every year for their service areas, and they assume there's a per capita use of 184 gallons per person per day. So we look at all their numbers that they've reported and add that up, and that's the number you see there.
Okay,
Yep.
how it's tabulated. Okay.
So another part of the annual report is not just the groundwater, but then we also look at the surface water adding to this. So surface water is actually a pretty significant source of the whole water supply for Wyandotte Creek subbasin. In fact, it's about 40% of the water supply. Now, if you compare that to a neighboring subbasin such as Vina, surface water supplies us with 40%, Vina is getting 2%. So it kind of puts that in perspective as well too, that we do have a lot of surface water here. So that's also broken out by those three, or at least those two subjects of agricultural surface water use, which includes the managed wetlands, and then municipal and industrial. And so you can see there, some of those are estimates and some of those are actual reported measured numbers from the districts themselves. And that adds up to about 33,000 acre feet. Surface water use also, just to put that in perspective, at the agricultural water demand, surface water provides about 1/3 of that, and groundwater provides about 2/3 of that, at least in this year. So then we kind of put that all together and look at total water available. So you can see groundwater extraction's about 58% of the total, and it supplies about 2/3 of the ag water demand. And then surface water provides 1/3 of the ag water demand. So you can look and see by the sectors where the water's coming from, where the total water available is coming from, to add up to a total of close to 80,000 acre feet in the Wyandotte Creek subbasin. And so what that tells us then is that we look at groundwater storage and how that applies throughout the years and kind of what we've got left over. So groundwater storage from 2020 to 21. So it's really a change between the year behind it and the current year that we're looking at in terms of volume. So here in this particular graph, the red numbers show, the pink to the red show areas where we've had declines in groundwater storage, and the blue areas indicate areas where we've had increases in groundwater storage. Overall, the change has been between 2020 and 2021 in spring, there was a change of 400 acre feet decrease, basically. So if you put that in perspective and you were to say, okay, what is that negative 400, how does that really fit in? If you looked at the last almost 20 years of data, 2000 to 2018, and you said, well, on average, what do we lose? The average change in groundwater storage is negative 3,700, and we're at negative 400. So we are higher in terms of average, and which is interesting because it was such a very dry year. You would expect it to be almost a lower number, but it's showing that we are in somewhat good conditions here, and we do know that Wyandotte Wyandotte Creek subbasin water is relatively stable, as we've seen, so. But on average, overall, from spring to spring, was about a -2-foot decrease in groundwater level decline and a -3-foot decrease in groundwater level decline in the fall. And so this map was actually developed using groundwater levels themselves, so going out and measuring a well and comparing it from year to year and looking at that difference, applying that to the surface area, and then applying another storage coefficient to that to get to these numbers here. So this is another busy graph, but it kind of puts what we're talking about all in one place. This is a requirement specifically for the annual report. What you see here along the bottom are the years we've been talking about from 2000 to 2018, and the colors indicate the water year type. So you can see the green bars, orange bars, red bars. So the green, well, I guess we could just start with, if you look at 2021, like I said, it was a critical year. So the reds are the critical years. The oranges are dry years. The blue are wet years. Yellow are below normal. And the green, what are the green? The green are above normal. So if we look at, we'll start with the solid black line. This is indicating groundwater extractions. And so we talked about that earlier of what's actually being pulled out, and that's for agricultural demands and also municipal, industrial, and rural residential. It's interesting that we did have a critical year, but yet the difference between last year and this year is that extractions still had a decrease. So that kind of plays into the numbers that we're looking at this year. In fact, it was about, if you look at the blue bars, that indicates storage. So if the blue bar is above the middle line, we gained water and storage in the subbasin. If that blue line is dropping below that middle line, we had decreases in groundwater storage. So in 2021, the difference was about 380 acre feet, like we were saying, about 400 acre feet change in storage. So then the dashed line kind of pulls that all together and says, okay, well, how does that add up throughout time? And so as you can see in years where there's red or orange bars, which are indicating critical or dry water year types, we have more extractions. In years of blue or green, we have less extractions. And throughout time, the dashed line shows the cumulative effect of that. So in essence, it's really good that we are above that middle line and we have some additional groundwater in the bank, if you can say that. Let's see. I think we can move on to the next one. Where am I at? Okay. GSP Implementation Progress is another part of the report. So we did a focus on the project and management actions and took a look at those, reached out to the project proponents and said, do we have any movement on those? And so as you can see here, there's quite a few of them that have had some progress on them. The first one is the residential water conservation project. That's in general, the plan outlined in Cal Water and South Feather Water and Power's urban water management plans mainly deals with residential conservation projects. So irrigation efficiencies, low flow nozzles, for example, turf replacement, that type of thing.
I have a question.
Yes.
Just something to think about, because it's counterintuitive, lower water, but yet more in the ground. And I'm sitting here processing. I believe DWR increased outflow through the low flow channel. That's the river through town, as opposed to going around through the after bay. And I wonder if there's any data collection to correlate increase in groundwater with using the low flow channel, because as you know,
The recharge.
Right, recharging. It'd be kind of an interesting look into that as far as impacts, because I know that there is a study being done right now about diverting more water around and going through, the after bay, for bay, as opposed to utilizing the low flow channel potentially. So it just kind of, you're processing different meetings that I'm in for different issues.
Sure.
And how that might impact our groundwater supply into the future.
The river doesn't connect. Robbers burned down, and actually our water flows north to south almost directly, and it doesn't flow towards the river or from the river, which is weird, but I remember those tests.
Okay.
The
So
groundwater.
maybe they've looked at that. I just, but I do know that they increased the flow this last summer.
Can't hurt the river, right?
Sure, I
Yeah,
mean,
so-
the more surface area that you can get for water to be on the
Right.
ground to then percolate in, could potentially have some good benefits there, absolutely.
It's really interesting because when they had that pollution plume, they did test wells all the way out to Palermo there into what we're talking about. And it didn't go ever towards the river or come from the river, it just went south. And that's why they had to take fresh water out there. And that's why it connects to the water, clean water consolidation project because they already took it out there because of that plume. Trying to avoid it.
So it could be that the water from the water's here and Palermo's here, it's draining down through there, pushing in so that it doesn't drain back down towards the river and that it is maybe replenishing that way, but it would be interesting to see.
Yeah. I just was sitting here trying to think of, well, why would that be? And knowing that there was an increase in outflow through that low flow.
I really believe.
Who knows?
All this is from, with all the added ag, but the way they change their technology and how they irrigate, I think that's caused the groundwater to come out there.
Could be.
Yeah.
There's a lot of irrigation efficiencies that we've seen.
More efficient. And I had, somebody call me the other day, they're planting orchards out there by me and was really kind of upset because they have a domestic well. And I go, I don't think it's going to harm you because of the technology they're using now.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a secret. I didn't mean to put it on record.
I just realized your mic was on, sorry. Oh, that makes sense.
Well, good, because
But I agree, you ought to put more water in the river just for recreation.
I know it's 5 degrees colder too. If anybody's wondering, because it's all coming out of that river valve.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really cold.
51 degrees. Right? So, it'd be below 51 degrees.
Oh, right. Probably.
Yeah, no fun to swim in.
No, I wouldn't guess so.
I'm sorry, we're all off.
No, not at all. Not at all.
But no, I'm on that other committee listening, and I just thought if there was any correlation there, that might be something to throw into that mix. But maybe
It would be
not.
interesting, and what we could do is see if there's aren't any continuous monitoring wells. So if we had a well there that collected hourly data, and we could do a comparison between when the water's running through the low flow channel or it's not, and seeing if there's any,
Yeah, just-
delayed responses from that.
Because they
That
are
would be
planning on
interesting.
making some changes there, so it would just be something to, I guess, pay attention to.
Which brings up something I never thought of before. Why don't we tap into all the monitoring wells they drilled for chasing the plume or the PCPs?
That's been on our
They're already
radar.
there. They're just capped.
We've been trying to get access for years, actually.
So who do we have to move on that?
Well, I'd have to probably circle back to get the exact details on that, but it's something that we've definitely been looking at. But I'm happy to look into that a little bit more and give you more of a better answer on that. It's in somebody else's ownership at this point, and it's a communication barrier that we've run into.
The property owner?
It's all coming back to me. I think when I asked Christina about that, the owner wanted the county to take ownership of them and indemnify them of any issues associated with the wells. I think there was something like,
yes.
but the county didn't want to do that, especially because they were for hazardous waste monitoring.
Yeah.
So I think that was part of the
We
issue.
just wanted to monitor but not own them.
Right.
Well, maybe that owner will come to me and need something. Let's leave it at that.
Okay. We'll look into it.
But that does tie into the next project, which is the ag irrigation efficiency study. And as you recall, that is that was a work done in the Vina subbasin. A survey was put out to irrigators to really have an understanding of what practices they're using, what practices they could be using, and a number of other things. So that survey's been done, it's been analyzed, and the final report should be coming out later on this spring. So the idea there is that these would be voluntary implementation practices. And while it's really based in the Vina GSA, there's no reason that we couldn't carry that over into our subbasin as well. The Palermo Clean Water Consolidation Project, that one's moving forward as well. And as you recall, that is a project involving landowners in a specific area of Palermo getting connected to South Feather Power and Water Agency's water. And that application has been submitted for grant funding.
The county dedicated $7 million to it.
Thank you. The Oroville Wildlife Area Robinson's Riffle Project is also a project that has been, grant funding has been applied for as well. The Thermolito Water and Sewer District Water Treatment Plant Capacity Project, that project was funded by Thermolito Water and Sewer District, and at the time of this report, work was being done to hire some folks to move the next step forward. The Water Loss Monitoring Project, that is in the process of looking at funding sources to get that moving a little bit further, but that's definitely something on the radar of South Feather Water and Power. And then general plan updates. This is a management action in the GSP. Butte County staff has been working with other staff throughout other departments to update the water element to bring the language more in line with Sigma relevant information. And then the last one is another management area or management action, which is expansion of water purveyor's service area. This would be for surface water supplies. And so Palermo Consolidation Project, that's a prime example of expanding the service area of a surface water supplier. In addition to these projects, GSP implementation included language that, none of our groundwater levels that we see are out of compliance, that we are on track to meeting our interim milestones, and all of them are well above the minimum thresholds. And of course, there's ongoing outreach and engagement, especially through this board's Water Advisory Committee. And so that's a stakeholder advisory committee that's dedicated to giving perspective to the board and then also pushing that information back out to their constituents. And that's always moving forward. So in addition to that, we continue to monitor. We monitor at least 3 times or 4 times a year, depending on the well itself. Data management associated with that, working on these annual reports, intra and interbasin coordination so that we're really reaching out to our adjacent neighbors as well at some level and making sure that, we're on the same page and kind of everyone knows what everyone else is doing. And then also a drought impact analysis study. This was funded by the county for the water year 2021 as well. And in fact, a few of the pieces of that work were included into this particular annual report. It's going to be interesting to come out. So there was a presentation this week to the Butte County Board of Supervisors. The report itself is not yet complete, but that should be coming out in May. And then at that point, there'll be a webinar as well to understand that. But it really characterizes the conditions of 2021 and the economic impacts of the drought. And it's also going to be interesting to look because it's going to identify areas that could be vulnerable to additional drought impacts. So with that, did you want to talk about the schedule?
Sure.
Okay, great.
So, good afternoon, Chair Conley and board members. Thank you. I'm Cami Loser from Butte County Department of Water and Resource Conservation. Kelly had alluded to earlier in the beginning of the presentation that moving forward with the annual reports will take a different process. Just given the timing of getting this in by April 1st, the document was prepared and then submitted and is being brought before you, obviously, post submittal. So we look in moving forward that the WAC will be involved in review of the annual report, and in probably sometime October, or when the water numbers come in, we'll present some of the preliminary data of the monitoring numbers to the WAC and review some of the requirements of the annual report and discuss if there's the format as well as the presentation of the information in the document, and they can make some recommendations as to if there's any additional data that's needed or desired to be included in the report, and then they would make recommendations to be presented to this board. And then after that, we foresee that the board will see the fall monitoring numbers, that will actually have that data. Hopefully we'll have it for the WAC as well. And then consider the recommendations from the WAC and identify if there's any additional resources that would be needed, or studies or data that would be needed, and then if we would need to hire a consultant to assist us with that information. As Kelly indicated, David's Engineering and Ludorf and Scalmanini in their work contributed to some of the information for the annual report. And then this board would give us direction and authorization as applicable. And then in the winter, we would bring back the annual report to the WAC, and they can review and make any comments as well as any additional recommendations to this board. And then in February or so, present the annual report to this board and have approval, and then we fold it into the county report that's required as part of Chapter 33 and present that to the Board of Supervisors, and then submit the annual report to DWR by April 1st. So that's how we see the process moving forward. That way it does involve the WAC and public comments, and is a little more integrated. I think that's all.
Nope, one of the more important ones here. We really want to give big kudos to the well owners here in Butte County. Without permission to be able to access those wells and collect this data, we couldn't get this work done. So it's really important. We want to acknowledge that. Also, technical support from David's Engineering, Ludo from Scalmini Consulting, and the GSA managers in all of the 3 subbasins who really come together to put these plans together in a way that makes sense, and they're not completely different from one another. Our Butte County Water Commission's Technical Advisory Committee, we want to acknowledge too that they were able to go ahead and review some of the early drafts of this annual report and provide some really good feedback for that. So with that, I want to thank all of them, thank everyone here, and open it up for any questions.
Mr. Chairperson, I do have one blue speaker card that was actually for 5, but could probably be with this one.
Hey, there's one of the supervisors advocating that we start collecting money. Of course, that's Supervisor Teeter, who I like and all that, but he doesn't have any GSA. He doesn't have. So you might want to educate him that these landowners probably don't want us putting meters on their wells or taxing them in any way. I don't want it to get traction.
Yes, so yeah, we'll segue into that after you've received public comment.
Okay, sorry, that was my public comment. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You gonna? I should talk myself.
Tasha Levinson, Orville resident. Thank you very much for the report. I am going to let you know, because I try never to do anything behind people's backs. I did write to the governor saying, I hope you reject our groundwater sustainability plan. I find the minimum threshold just, all those numbers are just too low. And if we ever get anywhere near them, the state's not going to be able to help us. We're going to be in way too much of a crisis. And I really think if we want to work for sustainability, we needed higher numbers across the board. You've heard me say that all before, so that should not come as a surprise. I want to thank you very much for the work you're doing to bring clean water to the Palermo residents. I think that's great. And it does seem like a lot of what Thermolito Water and Sewer is doing is helping to consolidate and do good things there, and that would be nice. I'm thinking of this as a resident. The cost of the water from our three main sources, at least for residential people, might play a part in this. It certainly plays a role in the conservation that goes on. The fact that Oroville has some of the most expensive water in the state really does play a role in our ability to develop business, our dead-looking yards, all that kind of thing. In terms of this chart in particular, you had 45 people who did bother to report their dry well conditions for residential wells, which is remarkable considering that that puts their homes up for being red tagged because they don't have water, which is part of why people are not going to report that. So the idea that you got 45 reporting means that residential people who are drawing on wells are in actually much greater trouble than is necessarily reflected in this. I would question your one that talked about water availability. You actually talk about water usage, not availability, that 46,000 that is coming from the groundwater and another 33,000 from surface water. You are talking about usage, not availability. You might want to change your caption so that it's more accurate on that. All in all, seeing 45 people having their wells go dry to possibly red tag their house tells me we are in greater trouble than the optimism that seems to be displayed. And we've got to be careful of that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have brought up at the county, we need to change our rules and regulations on that because many counties allow potable water to be delivered to a storage tank. We've always had such an abundance of water, it's kind of in our DNA here to require potable water before we allow people to live in a home. So I am going to address that. And there's approximately 50,000 residents that depend on wells. And so I still think the lumber, and I have a family that's in the well business. There's just not, I understand you're like the canary in a coal mine, and I respect you for that. That's why I like having Bill up here too. But I don't think it's quite as drastic as you think. I think the science will prove it's not yet.
I hope you're right.
I do too.
Hope so.
And if I'm wrong, I'll take you to dinner.
I just want you to be right. I want us to win on this one.
I was just going to echo that. I know my in-laws lived in Queen Creek in Arizona, and it's a desert, and all the homes out there were, you trucked in your water. That's how it was, and it was completely an acceptable practice. So, yeah, rethinking, I think, and reimagining that would be helpful to alleviate the fear for people to be more, apt to report that where they're not thinking, oh my God, now I'm going to be booted from my property. That would be a problem. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
I totally agree, and I'm going to make clear for water districts, we would not include that within a water district's boundary. Probably not their sphere, but, out in the country, it should be allowed.
Do you mind if I make one quick comment too? On the My Dry Water Supply reporting, it's voluntary, and it's also anonymous, so you don't actually have to put your parcel's address in there if folks are worried about, a red tagging situation. But we also know that that's not being pursued through the county as well for those folks. So I just wanted to make sure that that was pointed out.
Please make sure that gets announced at the next drought task force meeting because that was not made clear. I do know that they have helped them to have actual storage facilities on a lot of places so people can get trucked in water, which was not available before, but that's through the drought task force. And this possibility of red tagging is that's where I've heard that, and heard it sufficiently that people would have been afraid to report. So let's get that out then. Thank you.
I think I'm up next for item 7, which is, okay, the executive order. So, again, thank you, Cami Loser, Director of Water and Resource Conservation, Butte County. So on May 28th, the governor put into place an executive order N7-22, or the EO, which identified 15 actions to be implemented by state, local agencies, business sectors, and citizens. Don't worry, there's not a presentation. And to mitigate the effects of drought conditions. One of the action items, Action 9, that is applicable to the work of the GSA, there's 2 components to Action 9. And what it states is that the public permitting agency, so in this case, environmental health, cannot approve a permit for a new groundwater well or the alteration of an existing well in the subbasin, subject to SGMA and classified as medium or high priority without first obtaining written verification from a GSA managing the basin, so in this case, Wyandotte Creek, GSA, or an area where the basin or the well will be located, gosh, I can't even read that. So you can't the county cannot permit a well without getting written verification from the GSA that it would not be inconsistent with the GSP, essentially, and that it would not prevent the GSA or to be any of the management items within the GSP. It wouldn't interfere with the sustainability of the basin. So the second part of action item 9 is that the county will not issue a permit for a new groundwater well or alteration of an existing well without first determining that the extraction of the groundwater from the proposed well is not likely to interfere with the production and functioning of an existing nearby well and not likely to cause subsidence that would adversely impact or damage nearby infrastructure. So what really applies to the GSA is Part A, but it is important to note that these requirements do not apply to the permits for individual domestic wells or for public water supply systems. For instance, Thermolito, if they wanted to drill a well, they could. So what you have before you is a kind of the verification process. We, the management committee and staff working with environmental health, is trying to find a way to minimize the amount of paperwork and going back and forth and review of the permit by the GSA. So we have created an acknowledgement form that has, that's in your packet as well, that has kind of an outline of the GSP and the acknowledging that currently the GSP or the numbers are within the operation, the margin of operational flexibility, and as we're not hitting any of those, the minimum thresholds or the minimum thresholds. So with that in mind, having an acknowledgement form that the permittee would sign acknowledging that there's a GSA, that there's minimum thresholds and measurable objectives and minimum thresholds. I have to say them in order, I get them wrong. And and also noting that the GSA does not guarantee the maintenance of any defined water level, that the GSA is not responsible for otherwise liable for any costs or investments or payments related to the groundwater permit, that the permit issued by the county does not guarantee the extraction of a specific amount of water, that the GSA does have the authority to limit groundwater extractions, that the GSA manages the groundwater in the Wyandotte Creek subbasin, and that by signing this acknowledgement form, the GSA is actually providing verification for environmental health that issuing the permit for a large diameter well would not be inconsistent with the GSP. We added in, you'll see in the cover portion of the acknowledgement form that we did add that the GSA does have, reserves the right to rescind this consistency verification at any time during the permit period where the permit is open. If they haven't drilled the well, they have 12 months to drill the well or extend the, apply for an extension. So if water conditions change within the basin over the course of the year until they drill the well, that this board could rescind this consistency verification and they wouldn't be able to drill the well. So right now, for example, the county does have a hold on issuing large diameter well permits until the GSAs all have their verification process in place. The Vina GSA did approve this acknowledgement form, and that is what will be sent to environmental health, and they will include that in their permit application process, and then that way the permits can be reviewed and that process can move forward. I will say that this verification form and acknowledgement form has been reviewed by legal counsel and is being presented here for your consideration.
We put something with it that they can voluntarily allow us to have monitoring at their wells?
We could ask
I mean, just
for that.
even, I don't want to change this because then we have to go through the whole process, but maybe we just add a little cover sheet that if you would like, would you like to have information on becoming a monitoring well so we can develop more science or something like that?
Sure, we could probably ask environmental health if, we're also working with environmental health to have kind of a, another form for making findings, and perhaps there is something there that we can ask if there's something that they could check that they're willing to do that. Would that, okay.
I know a farmer that's dramatically being impacted. He wants to plant his rice. He has 2 wells, 2 levels of property, right? He can't gravity feed to the other level of property, and that well was in for a permit, but because the guy repairing the well said he wanted to drill out some silt, that's called deepening. He can't do anything. So he's facing 600 feet of pipe.
Oh, wow. I will say that we might not want every well to be a monitoring well. We might have.
No, they're too close.
Yeah, but I think that we could work with environmental health to identify areas that we know we would want to have more monitoring, and we could perhaps map those areas and target that. So as well permits within those areas come up, that we at least have an opportunity to approach those.
Just don't overthink it. Give them the opportunity, and then if it doesn't work for us, just tell them we don't need it.
Okay.
Right? Just give it to everybody, man. Right?
Yeah.
This has probably already been thought of, but with title companies, disclosures for, people purchasing property, or this, because obviously these are changes. Do you know if that process or what that looks like, or has it been changed or information passed on to, so that, I'm just thinking we had a guy buy an orchard some time back here in the city. In fact, he got into a little bit of a challenge with removal of trees for his orchard. So somebody that came, recently came to our community, bought land for the purpose of ag. And then, so I don't know what that process looks like when you're purchasing property and disclosing that, hey, there's additional hoops that may need to be jumped through.
We haven't talked about the title report process associated with this. I would imagine, though, that if you were purchasing a piece of land that had an open well permit, that because it needs a well, then that information would be given to them. Once the well is in, then this
Doesn't apply.
It doesn't apply.
Right.
If the county were to, if we were to have a moratorium on wells, that's at some point in the future. I'm not suggesting that, Chair Conley, that.
Saw the dirty look. Like,
But then
Our workload's
that would
going
obviously
up.
apply to everyone and wouldn't be a result of this. But thank you for
I was just, yeah,
thinking
just
about that
think-
step
yeah,
for
well,
sure.
I've drilled a few wells in my time buying bare land out here, and I'm just thinking, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
you know, then if you bought a piece of property and you couldn't drill on it, that would be, yeah, big problem. Yeah, it would basically render the property just unusable at that point, yeah.
Unless we allow you to truck water in.
Well, right?
Okay, you want a motion, huh?
Yes, please.
I see that, where is it at on the agenda? Item she just reported.
Cheat like me to say.
What's that?
Just say a motion to approve what you put before us or something like that.
Yeah, I move that we adopt what was presented to us.
Okay.
I just don't see it on here.
Need a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye?
Aye. Oh, you guys are easy. Anybody opposed? I know you are, but that's okay. So, I'm supposed to do that, huh? Okay. The board will review administrative and financing revenue options. Right? Am I on the right one now? Yeah.
Yes, you are. We're just moving through the agenda with or without you, Chair Connolly.
I still got something on my mind, $1 million problem.
I thought you said this was item 9, the one you just presented.
Eight,
was-
I have 7. It was 7.
It's 7,
Now
yeah,
it's-
that's
now we're
what
on-
confused me. There
Okay,
you go.
Sorry,
Okay.
sorry.
No worries.
How
All
my
right,
brain
trying to
works.
Now see, he was guilty of what? Yeah.
All right, so this is about the administration and management and financing options of the GSA. As you know, the management committee staff, those of us that are up here, have essentially been administering the GSA. We did used to have facilitation services with Tanya at CBI, and which was a lot of help especially during the preparation of the GSP, but we no longer have the facilitation support services. So what I will present today is kind of an overview of some of the administrative functions and of the GSA tasks or roles and responsibilities that we have been doing, but then other items to consider that are necessary for the ongoing operations of the GSA. And then I will also talk about some financing options, and knowing that I am not an expert in those financing options, but just to put them out on the table for perhaps further discussion. And really what we're wanting to get some guidance from you all on is how you see the GSA being managed, and then what types of financing options do you need to know more information about so that you can make some decisions on how to essentially get some money for the GSA. Oh, yes, and possibly, if you feel it's necessary, we're forming an ad hoc with perhaps 2 of the members of the board, maybe those that aren't here, to,
Read my
if
mind.
they, if they want, that way they can provide some recommendations to the board moving forward. So, oh, I think I got it. Unless I start hitting it nervously or something. Again, so we'll talk about administration, how the GSA operates, getting an understanding of the administrative and technical needs of the GSA, and understanding some of the expenses for the administration and operations of the GSA, and then the financial aspects of the GSA, things to consider moving forward. Just as a review of the JPA, Article 12 of the JPA does talk about operations and management. There, in that section, it does note that there's an administrator and plan manager. They can be one and the same person or separate. The administrator is kind of an optional role that the board can put a person in that position. It was especially necessary during the preparation of the plan. Someone this whole team essentially managing or administering the GSA. And Kelly has served as in the role of the administrator up until this point, and then Christina serves as the plan manager, responsible for uploading that document onto the DWR web portal. The county currently serves as the treasurer and controller and being responsible for having the independent audit conducted and obviously tracking all of the money for the GSA. And then with regard to operations and management, having legal counsel and other officers or consultants as part of the GSA. And as you know, we have legal counsel who is actually with us online today, I believe. And the board can also appoint and contract for services for consultants and independent contractors as deemed necessary to manage and run the GSA. Okay, I think that's all. With regard to employees in management, currently the JPA does say that the agency will not have employees, and in lieu of hiring employees, the agency can engage with one or more members, meaning that agency members, the city, Thermolito, and the county, to manage any or all aspects of the agency. So we've been trying to kind of divide and conquer the responsibilities of running the GSA up to this point. And then having those roles and responsibilities kind of detailed a little more thoroughly. And then the agency also, again, has the ability to hire, it says competent registered civil engineers as opposed to incompetent ones. Chris might be able to give us some names of incompetent ones. And to devise, and mostly to work on for preparation of the GSP. Again, so with administrative services and operating expenses, so these are some of the broad categories that would be included in the budget essentially, but with regard to administration and management, having a GSA coordinator / manager, whatever the title you all would prefer. Essentially, the member agencies, again, have been serving in that role collaboratively. Also, professional services, legal services, financial services, public outreach or meeting facilitation, as well as grant writing. Obviously, the staff can't do all of those things, and so the GSA should think about hiring out for all of those services, as well as additional technical consultants, and kind of separating that from professional services, where there are certain things that need some technical assistance. For instance, the county does monitoring of wells and did the preparation of the annual reports, but we did have David's Engineering and Ludolf and Scalmanini assist with that, some of that information. So needing technical consultants for that. And as well as just ongoing data management and identifying needing technical assistance with some of the data gaps, as well as implementation of some of the project and management actions identified in the plan. And then at 5 years, we do have to do our 5-year update evaluation, kind of seeing where we're at with sustainability and, reviewing the 5 years prior and where we're landing in terms of our measurable objective and interim milestones. So, and then also there's just the miscellaneous expenses of running an agency, right? So everything from postage to printing to website costs, as well as venues for public meetings. The city has allowed us to meet here. Thermolito actually hosted the WAC meeting a few weeks ago. So currently we're using the member agencies' facilities, but there might be a need to be in a different location for workshops and such. Other administrative responsibilities, just the regular ongoing daily, weekly, and monthly management and operations of the agency, but also, and we came up with this list of all of these things that we've been doing. Obviously, managing the board meetings and administration of the WAC, but also making sure that the Form 700s are in different I almost said ethic trainings. I did say it. And then doing the finances and budgeting. Kelly's been tracking our budget. Also, again, managing the WAC, and then if there were to be any additional ad hoc committees. Overseeing the consultants, especially during the preparation of the GSP, as well as working towards GSP implementation, kind of tracking legislation, tracking grant information coming out, and just kind of short and long-term work planning, as well as responding to any public requests. So that's essentially what a GSA manager would be doing. Again, legal services fall within the categories of expenses. Financial services, I'll just kind of scroll through these. Public outreach, again, we had CBI doing a majority of that work before, and so working to continue being able to have the meetings, maintaining our website, doing public informationals and educational materials, and just monitoring our interested parties list. We do have an email list. And then grant writing services. As you know, the Sigma grant program will open up for round 2 in the fall. So we'll be looking to prepare some projects and management grant applications. We can only file for one grant application, so multiple projects will feed into the grant application in the fall. And so that will take a little bit of effort as well. And then, again, technical consultants for GSP implementation. I listed all those things previously, and many of our office supplies and other miscellaneous expenses. So at this point, just identifying like who administers the GSA, and there are some options as for a GSA coordinator. That's kind of what we're calling it, but again, you can call it whatever you prefer. The JPA does talk about, again, a member agency can kind of serve as staff. A member agency could have an employee that's contracted by the GSA, and the GSA would have to fund that position. The GSA could have an employee serve as staff, which would require an amendment to the JPA. The GSA could also hire an independent contractor or a professional consulting firm to administer the GSA, or there can be a combination of all of the above. Just food for thought. So I didn't know if anyone had any questions at that, thoughts, because I'm going to shift gears to financing options.
Independent contractors are very difficult now. Under current California law, you're generally liable unless they have several other.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, it's very difficult to do.
Yeah. All right. So financial provision. So this was from the JPA as well. So initially, the way the JPA talks about financing is that initially the GSA would be funded through a GSP grant, which essentially paid for the GSP, and as well as in-kind contributions of the member agencies. And so each member agency has been contributing, is it the same for Wyandotte? $5,000 from each member agency, and that has essentially been what's been covering our expenses and legal fees.
Per year.
Yeah, per year, yes. And then I should note that a budget prior to the commencement of each fiscal year, you'll need to adopt a budget, which you have been doing, but this one might be a little more robust, this next one coming up. And then the JPA talks about long-term funding, that the board, the GSA would look to adopt some kind of long-term funding plan to cover the operating and administrative expenses of the agency. And again, these are all the things that you're funding, which we talked about before. as well as GSP implementation. I think one of the things to kind of keep in the back of your mind is we talk about PMAs and some of the projects moving forward, but if those are things that will be funded by the Sigma grant that we apply for in the fall, the funding for that or the monies for that probably wouldn't come back to the GSA until the summer of 2023. So there's this gap between now and then for PMAs, but then also administration. So keeping that kind of in the back of your mind of needing some funding for covering the annual reports, which will be due before we get funding from Sigma, although annual reports could be funded by that, but for this first year, it would need to be truly the GSA. And also note that the Sigma funding is competitive for medium and high priority GSAs, so subbasins, so others will be competing for the funds as well. Even though there is anywhere from $1 million to $20 million that will be available per subbasin, there's only so much available for all of. Is there 70 GSAs that are medium and high priority? Yeah, about 70 GSAs will be applying for that funding. I did kind of create a example or draft budget. The items here that you see in red, those are the items that were included in the GSP and the estimate for administration, which I think is $281,000. The other items kind of above that are items that would be potential revenue for the GSA, and then the items below the red are additional things that to be covered for funding. And some of those items are GSP legal and litigation reserve. Let's see. Oh, office supplies and website, that wasn't included in the red items. Again, financial, the audits, we have to do annual audits. That's about $7,500 to $10,000 a year for that, and just other. Depending on what kind of funding mechanisms you choose, there might be some fees associated with if there's an election or just implementation, as well as wanting to kind of throw some grant writing in there as well. I will say these other categories I pulled from other GSA budgets. There are looking at how other GSAs have looked at their long-term funding. These additional categories were in their budgets. So there are several ways to fund the GSA. For GSA administration, again, member agency contributions, which is kind of how we've been moving along, as well as fees, assessments, and taxes. I'll talk about that in a moment. And then ways to fund kind of GSP implementation can be through grants, as well as fees, assessments, and taxes. So some of the funding options, I just created this little hierarchy chart. There's fees, assessments, and taxes. There's, with regard to fees, there's a Prop 218 fees that can be collected for, which is essentially the cost of service. There's Prop 26, which is a regulatory fee. There's assessments and taxes, and those do require voter approval, so they're a little more costly in terms of you're also paying for a ballot and an election, so keeping that in mind. I am not an expert in all of these. I have had to endure a Prop 218 hearing with Durham Irrigation District, and I'm sure Chris could add to that process as well. But that's the only one I could really speak to. But just to consider with these funding mechanisms, there are some limitations, and essentially the difference between kind of the assessments and taxes versus the fees in a Prop 218 or a Prop 26 is the noticing, the voting, and whether or not, like with the Prop 26, the board could actually vote on a fee and it wouldn't have to go to voters. So there's these various mechanisms that could be looked at in more detail by your ad hoc committee. So the examples of the types of fees that can be charged are a fee per acre, a usage extraction fee based on volume extracted, wellhead fees, as well as parcel tax or a special tax. So I did go into some of them a little bit, like a Prop 218 is a property-related fee. So it's related to the ownership or occupation of that's what the charges are related to. It could be charged to any parcel, but it must be proportional to the cost of providing that service to that parcel. And then with Prop 218, there is mandatory noticing and a majority protest hearing of affected parcel owners. So there is a process associated with that. Prop 26, these are fees that are intended to cover the cost of the regulation, which could be intended to cover the cost of the GSA, administering and operating the GSA. They cannot exceed the cost of that governmental activity. I mean, we can't make a bunch of money off of that fee. But these fees can be imposed without voter approval. And then, of course, there's parcel tax, which does require an election and a 2/3 voter approval to go into effect. I did include these possible timelines based on if we had an ad hoc committee meeting in May and the ad hoc committee could discuss and make some recommendations to the board. I would foresee that the ad hoc committee would probably need some additional information regarding the options of like a Prop 218 or a Prop 26, or even if there was to be an assessment or fee. But then in June, coming back to this board and kind of initiating the funding mechanism process, getting more information and seeing what, really developing a timeline and what steps would be required. If this board wanted to do a 218, I would say in June or July. Of course, we would need funding to be able to do a feasibility or a fee study, and then moving forward in August and September, perhaps doing some kind of public notice and hearing, and then identifying dates later in the year for the collection of fees, assuming that passes. And then again, Prop 26, kind of following the same footsteps. Taxes and assessments, again, would have to go be on a ballot and would require an election, and that one is a costly approach, because in and of itself is about $100,000 from what I understand. But so I would recommend kind of writing the coattails of existing elections rather than having a special election for taxes and assessments. So for our discussion purposes, if there's any preferred or not preferred approaches to funding, that way you can guide the ad hoc in that way. But if you do decide to form an ad hoc, some things that we've thought about doing with the VINA GSA is having a funding presentation done by either legal counsel or a consultant, so that that agency will have more information. And they actually voted to have their ad hoc committee be their SHAC. And then if you want to provide any thoughts, direction to staff of moving forward.
From what I've seen in Butte County, you're going to get resistance to all of these.
I know.
To the extent you can.
We totally agree.
Do the joint powers agreement, where it's the agencies involved contributing their time and facilities and within their own budgets, certain amounts. That way, then your other stuff can be more specifically project-related, and it can relate to benefit and burden going together. I think that'll give you your best shot of not having a revolution. Thank you.
No, you're reading my mind, actually.
Has any of the stakeholders kind of voiced when you think of the ag, community, or have they even considered this side of it? I mean, just in general conversation.
It considered, like, if we were to say, if they're saying, oh yeah, let's do a Prop 218 or something like that.
Yeah, has there been any kind of,
The discussions are just now getting started with all of the GSAs as to what's next and how we're going to fund the GSAs and administer them. Because as I've said, it has been staff.
Well, we want you to get all the grant money you can, and I'm going to appoint Bill Bynum and Kyle Daly to the subcommittee since they're not here.
right?
Yeah.
I'll second that. That was a motion.
You want on that? No, I just think anytime you go to tax somebody in California, Butte County in particular, it's tough. The only thing that would make it work is if the drought continues and we do have to curtail and do dramatic impacts to people personally, then they would probably support it. But right now, they're just going to see it as a tax and tell us, go pound sand. You can't get a 50% vote. I know my district pretty well. I don't know if the water companies could help or would be inclined to do it. I don't know.
You want to manage the GSA?
Not to say that we couldn't, but we'd be under the exact same thing. We'd have to do a Prop 218 hearing to raise our rates to be able to fund. I myself can't do it, so I mean, we'd have
So
to
it'd be a
hire-
benefit for everybody, not just you too, so. I don't know. I knew this day was coming, but I was hoping it was like about 5 years after my retirement. I don't know. But
I
I
think-
think, I'm not kidding, I think Daley representing the ag community and Bill Bynum being a would be a good start for ad hoc committee and let them work on it.
There's certainly a lot more details and questions to be dug into that your ad hoc could and then provide recommendations to.
It's in a way, it's an unfunded mandate, Again, they give us enough money to get us in here, and then now we've got to find money to keep it going.
Yeah.
And on the county level, I don't have support, but I would take the money from our water transfers and fund them all that way, but I don't think I could get 3 votes.
I think with the ad hoc, the way that it would most likely move forward is to kind of give them this presentation, flesh out what we really think that we're looking for in terms of the amount of money to fund for the next fiscal year, and then look at the various funding options, like how do the fees play into that? Or is there a certain part that could be more of a regulatory fee from a Prop 26 versus a 218, or do we look at volumetric fees for?
Then you're talking metering, and that's going to get
Yeah.
immediate resistance.
Yeah.
I told you this was going to happen.
Yep.
I think Daley, his connection, he's young, and his connection, I didn't do this as a joke, and
Yeah.
his connection to ag and, the cattlemen, and also, I'm blanking out here, but anyway, and then Bill Bynum, he's a single well guy, and a small guy, and thinks different. So if they could work on it, and I'll help too if you want, but I'll be the guy that's sticking them at it, that's telling you you're not going to get it to pass. You'd have to need something very dramatic, like their wells are all going dry, then everybody'd want to, and we're trying to be in front of it. You're an elected official, you live here, you see it going any different?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, it's another layer of government, and what am I getting for it? Just more regulation. So that's a tough sell. And like you say, it's to prevent something that may or may not ever happen. So why are we even here? I think that's a tough sell.
I do think having I want to say Dave Daly, but Kyle Daly, he'll be able to share what the ag community might be willing to
Yeah,
do
that's
and
my thought, right?
provide that input.
Yeah, he could go to the Farm Bureau and the cattlemen and just get his thoughts on it. And then Bill Bynum, he understands the importance of it. And I'm not doing it. I think that's a wise choice for subcommittee. And I'll help, you know.
And the other part of it too is what is the
Is that too
overall?
many of us, though? Okay, those two then.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing I think too is what we're looking at is an overall cost to operate this program, you know, this new layer, you know, when you take how many are involved, you know, how many partners, right? And that cost as it's distributed out system-wide, it may not be really a big deal. At the
Yeah,
end of the
but
day, it may be pretty small.
It'd been great if the state would have said, hey, if you're an ag well, you're gonna have to contribute $50 a year to this. If you're a domestic well, $10 or something, and gave us a fund. But no, they leave it us to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, here we go.
But if it ends up on that kind of level, that's not too scary.
Not too scary, but they're still not gonna be happy.
And there are some financial provisions. I mean, the state has provided a number of funds through the grant programs to be able to help folks implement the GSP, but we do realize that there are things that fall outside of.
And it's not
Grant.
sustainable on grants because it's one-time money.
Exactly.
And we have to be sustainable.
And there's a chance that we might not be successful in obtaining that grant. So we kind of need to plan for maybe worst case.
Like a drought.
I hate to say it, but we've got really low-income demographics overall. That could help us in a backwards sort of way, but. Well, those are my thoughts. Anybody else got anything? Do you want to pipe up about it?
No, I mean, I think you're moving in the right direction. I think that it'll have to be funded somehow, and it's either gonna come from, you know, my ratepayers and your guys' taxes or some, amalgamation of the two.
Yeah. Thank you for that report.
So
Oh.
did that motion pass?
Yeah.
Okay, I couldn't remember.
All in favor of putting those two under, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
They're done. Okay, so next up is public comment. Would you like to speak on something not on the agenda? Hey, thank you for your input. It was very good. Enjoyed it. All right, we're.
Chair Conley,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt you.
Go
We do
ahead.
have 3 reports and correspondence.
Oh,
items.
go ahead. Please.
Sorry. Real quick, just an update on the Wyandotte Creek Advisory Committee. They did meet last month, and I didn't know if there was any updates from you guys on, no, okay. So we'll be working with them in the future as well. Your 2-year audit was completed, and that's about $2,500 every 2 years. That'll be posted to the website as well. Hint, hint. And, yeah, board training reminder update from Chris, if you want to.
I'm coordinating with Bill and with Kyle on the entities, so it's basically
Oh,
requirements.
Brown Act.
Ethics and
yeah.
and the ethics, yeah.
The 81, 2, 3.
Sexual harassment, ethics, and, yeah. All right,
Brown Act.
yeah.
Additionally, there's Form 700s, which you likely fill out through your own agencies. Just a reminder, the Wyandotte Creek GSA needs a specific copy with a wet signature on that, and Autumn Thomas from our office is coordinating that.
She emails me, my aide will take care of it.
Did we do that on this? I listed that you guys on that, yeah.
Is that it? I think I gotta go have a drink. I knew this.
It always gets tough when you get to the money part.
Well,
so,
yeah, when you got.
Yeah.
I usually